Good evening. I'm John Batchelor. This is The John Batchelor Show. Mary Kissel of the Wall Street Journal editorial board and the host of Opinion Journal each day at 1 p.m. East Coast time joins. This, of course, is Mad Max Music, which means we've already pushed the button. And Mary, we're already in Australia. Good evening to you.
Good evening, all the way on the other side of the world.
Where it is morning and where there is an election not underway, but you could fool us because each time I think the Australian governance is patient and they only run a 5-week campaign and we're told that it's going to begin in September, there's more food throwing in Australia. And in this case, we welcome John Roskam of the Institute of Public Affairs in Melbourne. John is the executive director and he also translates for us because we are two people separated by a common language. And I'm going to be very careful now because I don't want to say anything irreverent, but it seems that Australia has invited a kind of battle that we recognize here as gender wars. They probably have another way of putting it in Australia. John, a very good morning to you. What is Julia Gillard, that's the Prime Minister, Labour, Julia Gillard, Kentucky Fried Quail, and why is that suddenly worth apologizing about by the leader of the opposition? Good morning to you.
Hello, John. Hello, Mary. That's a very good question, John. What's happened here in Australia in the last few days is that the Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, as you said, has accused the opposition leader of being a misogynist. After she said that, and she's now said that a few times over the last few months, it emerged that at a Liberal Party fundraiser, so the opposition Conservative Party fundraiser, there was a menu distributed that made fun of Ms. Gillard's bodily appearance and the various aspects of her anatomy. This, the Prime Minister declared, was the reason why the endorsed candidate should be disendorsed, why the Leader of the Opposition should apologise, and the fact that there was this menu allegedly circulating to a small dinner of about 20 people has literally been front page news, John and Mary, here in Australia for the last 3 or 4 days. It has subsequently emerged that the menu was not distributed and that it was simply a joke between the restaurateur and his son, and a chef at the restaurant thought the joke was funny and put a picture of the menu up on his Facebook page. So as Australia is by many accounts sliding into a recession and has many, many economic challenges, this is what has consumed Australia for the last few days.
Well, it sounds like a slow news week down there, John. My goodness. You know, it always strikes me in these gender wars that the discrimination only ever goes one way, that the women can accuse the men of discrimination against women as being misogynist. But there's no way that Tony Abbott can respond and say, no, actually, you're very anti-man. Isn't that right?
That is exactly right, Mary. And the fact that Tony Abbott has a female chief of staff, his deputy is a female, he has
striking chief of staff.
Exactly, three gorgeous daughters. Seems to go by the wayside. And the other part of their hypocrisy is that the left, of course, have over the years thrown outrageous sexist slurs at conservatives. But the left never seem to pick on their own side. They only pick on conservatives. And unfortunately here overnight, John and Mary, the left were given a bit more ammunition when a conservative talk show host asked the Prime Minister live on air whether the Prime Minister's partner, and of course she's not married, whether her partner was gay. So this is now the latest scandal to hit Australia, which is a radio talk show host asking the Prime Minister whether her partner is gay.
John, I want to rush because all of a sudden I'm recognizing that this is about politics, and when you start throwing this sort of nonsense around, it means somebody's losing very badly. That's the way we would read it here.
Absolutely.
You know, you accuse the other side of all kinds of extraterrestrial activity because the polls are telling you that you can't grind this out on policy. Has the polling gone worse? Mary, several weeks ago we started that Gillard was 10 points down, and then she went 12 points down. Is it worse now, John?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is, John. She's, depending on the polls, 14 to 15 points down. The real political issue is that on many accounts she will only be in the job for about another 2 weeks. These distractions, these gender wars, these jokes about menus in restaurants and all of these things are distracting Australians. Her own party is recognising this. And again, if we may be talking 2 or 3 weeks' time, John and Mary, the likelihood is that Kevin Rudd will be back as Prime Minister, and of course this is the man who was dumped because all of his colleagues hated him. Even though they hate him, they think he will stand a better chance against him.
How does that, is this because you can replace your party leader before the election, John? Yeah. They're going to do it again. They did it again.
They did it once, they can do it again.
And that's why they don't want to all go to Canberra. I see this, that after June 17th.
Exactly correct, John.
Yes. So we can have a coup before the election. Another coup.
Unbelievable.
That's exactly, and it's led by the same people who replaced Kevin Rudd the first time.
Who kicked him out the first time.
Now,
it is
this is unbelievable.
Bizarre, and I am sure your listeners stateside cannot make head or tail.
No, we understand.
And nor can most Australians.
We understand, John, because you mentioned the word recession, and we're watching on the front page of the Wall Street Journal that what we have is the World Bank has downgraded the globe, but including China and including the emerging markets, commodities are falling down, and all of the economies that were here prior, very rosy, are now troubled. We know we have been here in the United States. We know Europe is in a recession. So, Mary, that would be the surest indication that there's going to be a change of government, that the recession in Australia is hit.
Yeah, well, we thought that too in this country last year in the presidential race, and look what happened, John. I mean, there's no such thing as a sure thing in politics.
Right. All right. Did you hear that, Mr. Roskam? You can't count Gillard out yet, though.
I think that's right. And while the politicians in Canberra are talking about these issues, the big story of the last few weeks in an economic sense is that the Ford Motor Company is no longer going to be making cars in Australia. Now, that's going to cost thousands of jobs. Part of the reason is because of our wage costs. Part of the reason is because of our carbon tax. These are the issues that Julia Gillard and Kevin Rudd don't want to talk about, but this is what is really consuming the attention of most Australians.
The markets in Asia have been performing very badly recently, and I want to connect it here to the United States, why we're watching Australia so carefully. Mary, you've taught me over these last years, if you're traveling to Australia, if this economy is doing well because of the demand for commodities, and when it turns down, we're all in trouble.
Well, the United States is a big growth engine in and of itself. So if the U.S. were stronger, I mean, take the 1997-98 Asian financial crisis. It didn't really touch the U.S. because the U.S. was doing just fine. So we're not necessarily pulled down if something happens in Asia Pacific. But Australia, and John, I want you to correct me if I'm wrong, is, I believe, much more dependent on China in that part of the world than we are. Isn't that right?
Mary, that's a very good analysis, and that is why the Australian stock market, I think, in the last 3 months is amongst the world's worst performing stock markets because, of course, share prices are a reflection of confidence in the future. In the last couple of weeks, the Australian share market, I think, has lost off the top of my head 8 to 10%, and this is why the chances of a recession are now growing by the day in Australia, partly because of the slowdown in commodities and China's demand for iron ore, but also because costs in Australia are so expensive. And so, for example, to put this into context, when Ford Motor Company said they were no longer going to make cars in Australia, the managing director said it costs twice as much to build a Ford car in Australia as it does in the United States. This is an absolutely seismic, significant comment.
John Roskam is the executive director of the Institute of Public Affairs. Right now, the polling is showing Labour, led by Julia Gillard, for the moment, 16 points behind Tony Abbott, the Liberal leader. Liberal is more akin to our Republican Party in Australia. The world financial doubts, and Australia right now in a food fight over Kentucky Fried Quail. Mary Kissel, the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal and Opinion Journal, at 1 p.m. each day, her own show. I'm John Batchelor. Thank you, Mr. Roskam. This is The John Batchelor Show.